Hi, I'm Dr. Amy Robbins, and welcome to Life, Death, and the Space Between podcast. I'm a clinical psychologist and medium, and here we explore life, death, consciousness, and what it all means. This is my last podcast of the year, and first of all, I wanted to thank everybody for listening, for continuing to share your experiences with the podcast, to share your ghost stories with me, to share your love of the podcast with others. I'm so grateful for your support, your messages, your emails, just sharing how the podcast has impacted you. It makes such a difference to me and really is the reason that I do the podcast. So as I thought about what to say for this year's final podcast, I knew I wanted to do a eulogy for 2020. It just seemed appropriate given everything that's gone on and given a lot of what I talk about. But I didn't know how to write it or exactly what to say. I looked up quotes, I tried to find some sort of inspiration, and I even sat down and wrote a little. But everything I wrote sounded and felt forced and inauthentic. And there's nothing that I dislike more than forced or inauthenticity. So as time was running out, I wanted to get this recorded so I could take some time off for the holidays and just recharge for the new year. And I trusted that I would have this podcast ready to go. I did what I tend to do in these situations, which is to ask for help. And sometimes more often than I'd like it to, that help, insight, or intuition comes at the most inopportune times for me. And that happens to be usually when I'm in the shower, likely because it's a time when I'm fully present and uninterrupted. And so this episode, this eulogy to 2020, as I'm calling it, was no different. So here is what came to me. So to 2020, the year that crammed all of life into 365 days. Literally, it felt like all of life was right here, waiting, showing us each and everything we needed to know all at once. And the amazing thing is that part of what pushed us all to this brink was death. Let's be honest, death that was clickbait lurking around every corner. The question then, as we end this year of life, is the question that is always important to be asking. What is your relationship with death? Did the fear of death paralyze you? Did you live your life differently from that fear? Did you reflect on what was and what is important and what matters? Did you reevaluate your life in some way this year? Did you lose someone you loved? Did you slow down, maybe just enough to begin to feel things stronger for the first time in a while, if ever? Did you grieve? Did you cry? Did you laugh? Did you smile? Did you die a little more this year, or did you live a little more? What are your answers to these questions? These are the questions that you asked us to answer 2020. You asked us to answer the questions of life. You asked us to answer the questions of what we want our lives to look like. You asked us to answer the questions how we want to take care of ourselves, our family, our communities, each other, and this planet. You asked us the questions that death asks us when we are willing enough to look death in the eye, to contemplate death, to use death as a compass to help us live our lives. As this year of 2020 draws to an end, many of us are cautiously optimistic about what next year might bring. Just like any death and ending, there is often a birth of something new that is learned or discovered or broken open as the result of the death. While 2020 was a painful and difficult year, and that might be the understatement of the millennium, I hope we never forget how much it taught us about how to live life and what really matters, because that is truly the gift of death and the gift of 2020. Like what you heard today and want to hear more? Wondering what comes next and what it all means? Head over to Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, or anywhere you get your podcasts and hit subscribe. Also, if you could take a minute to rate and review my podcast, I would really appreciate it. Stay tuned as we continue to explore life, death, and the space between.